so you have to think about this. And from DuPont's point of view, and DuPont is looking at this in a very interesting way, they're saying you need the tension of a very challenging goal. Inspirational goals call an organization to act beyond conventional boundaries. Now, DuPont is looking at climate change and saying, we've seen this before. Ozone depletion killed our CFC business. Climate change is about to do it again, and we get a double hit. Our energy prices are going to go up, and our feedstock prices are going to go up. How do we insulate ourselves from that? We stop using fossil fuels as a feedstock. If you look at the portfolio of DuPont right now, they're buying up seed companies, and they're looking on biomaterials. You know, the first biopolymer is called Serona. They're working on a biobutanol, which has better properties than ethanol, bioethanol, and they want to do it for cellulosic materials. This is an exciting area for them. This is where they're going. And DuPont has redefined itself over and over again. Fascinating company. You know, dyes, organic chemicals, started as gunpowder. Now they're trying to get into the biofield. You can phrase it any way you want. Energy efficiency targets, climate change targets, whatever works. You got to make sure it fits with your organization. But in the end, you have to make the business case by focusing on quantifiable and sometimes less quantifiable goals. But you got to make the business case. So there's how you set up the strategy. You move from there to get it done. And so you're moving in the idea of focusing inward. How do we develop this? And the first is you have to put numbers on this. You have to put dollars on this. You have to connect to the financial mechanisms of the firm. It doesn't work if you don't. You can set voluntary programs to the company, but you have to, if you're really going to make it stick, you have to connect it to the finances. And so a lot of companies are using these internal pricing mechanisms. You can set a shadow price for carbon. A lot of companies are doing this, that here's a price for carbon, we're going to do it internally. And so if you propose a project, you're going to put this price on there, and that's going to advantage companies that reduce their emissions, or projects that reduce their emissions and go forward. You can set up a special pool of money that you can draw from if you have projects that do this. You can lower the hurdle rate for projects that reduce their greenhouse gas emissions. These are all techniques that companies have used to try and think about how you connect the money aspect of the company to climate change reductions. You can normalize the costs. This one in the center. Synergy, now Duke Energy, figured out what is the cost per ton of CO2 equivalent to reduce their greenhouse gas emissions. This is the magic number that every company needs to know, because if there's a tax, or more importantly, if there's a cap and trade, you want to know, are you going to be a buyer or a seller? And that clearing price is everything. So if you don't know your cost per ton of CO2 to reduce, you're flying blind. This is the most important company a company can figure out. The price can figure out. You can do internal or external trading. The Chicago Climate Exchange has collapsed, but there are other exchanges out there. There's the Regional Greenhouse Gas Emission Inventory in New England. There's a Western States Initiative. And gaining the expertise to know when programs work and when they don't. And a quote from someone from Duke saying, like every fruit ripens at its own time, lay all the projects out. These make sense now. These make sense 10 years from now. These may never make sense, but lay them all out and figure out which way to go. Then you have to engage the organization. You have to get people buy in on this. This is tricky stuff. You want to get buy-in from the workforce. You can have all kinds of programs to do this. Alcoa gave everybody a tree and told them to plant it, connected to the idea of intergenerational aspects of this. Some companies have given subsidies to people who want to buy a hybrid car or a bicycle. There are all ways to make this connect, but the most important thing is you have to make it fit the culture of the organization. And so at Whirlpool, they don't even use the word climate change. And this quote captured it quite nicely. We've got a train moving on efficiency. We just totally confuse things and we brought in this new idea. And there are so many management initiatives that totally screw up companies. You know, there used to be total quality management, TQM was a big thing. And it got nicknamed total quality management because what it did to companies, because basically it was a GE program that people try to jam into their organizations lock, stock, and barrel. That just won't work. You have to make things fit. So if your company is really engaged on energy efficiency, keep going, keep pushing it. Don't bring in this new issue. Try and make it fit your company. Senior leadership is critical. In the words of one person at Alcoa, on a scale of 1 to 10, this is an 11. If your senior leadership's not behind it, this isn't going anywhere. We did ask an interesting question: which departments of functions were change inhibitors and supporters? And clearly the supporters were the executive suite or environmental health and safety. The number one inhibitors, you're all thinking in your head who it might be. Number one was marketing, and number two was accounting and finance. And marketing tends to be very conservative in these kinds of issues, and lose market share. changes were really difficult in those departments. So anytime you propose a change in a company, you're learning this in your organizational behavior classes, the first question you ask is, who's for it and who's against it? And then you start to have to deal with the politics of getting things done with that company. Same way. Finally, our second to last, you have to formulate a policy strategy. How are you going to get a finger on the pulse of what's going on in regulation? How can you influence regulation? There's an old Oklahoma expression that says, if you're not at the table, you're on the menu. Now they were talking, that's talking about gossip. And if your neighbors are having dinner and you're not there, they're talking about you. But the same is true in policy. If your competitors are at the policy table influencing what that policy is going to come out like, chances are you're not going to like it, and they will. So you really want to think carefully about how you engage the policy process. And in the end, in the words of Jim Rogers from Duke Energy, I want to avoid stroke of the pen risk. I really like that expression. The risk that a congressman or legislator can sign a bill and change the value of my assets overnight. You better be on top of this if you think that climate change is going to really affect your business and try and influence it in a certain direction. It was really interesting. The U.S. Climate Action Partnership, when they formed, came out with a page in the Wall Street or in the New York Times saying that we need climate legislation. And the Wall Street Journal ran an editorial, called them the Jolly Green Giants. He said, don't believe a word they say. They don't care about the environment. They're just trying to lobby for regulation that favors them and disadvantages their competitors in the marketplace. Stop the presses. The Wall Street Journal has just discovered that companies lobby Washington for regulations that give them an advantage in the marketplace. That's exactly what they do. And if a company can see an opportunity on climate change, or the Clean Water Act, or the Clean Air Act, that's a smart company. That's a company I want to invest in. And companies who are trying to influence the policy, saying, give us policy. Because guess what? We make efficient jet engines. We make microturbines. We make biofuels. We make super efficient truck engines. Bring it on. That's a smart company, and that's exactly what they should be doing. There are varying aspects. It's a very complicated terrain. I won't get into it, what policy can look like, but policy is key. And then it can take any one of these number of forms. It's not just a cap and trade. It's not just a tax. There are many ways it can be done, and they're in play right now. So while you see in Washington no activity on a carbon tax or a cap and trade, the issue is not dead by any means. CAFE standards are still alive and well. The gentleman from Navistar is certainly going to talk about this with light trucks and trucks and the increase in the efficiency standards all the way down. The final step is you have to engage external actors. You have to make the market environment respond to you. You know, it's not just the best mousetrap, but how do you set the conditions? And the best story I have on this is Whirlpool, for a time, thought about taking the Energy Star label off its appliances. Because people looked and said, you know, if it uses less energy and less water, it must not clean so well. I'm not going to buy it. And then they realized, no, wait a minute. And they started to educate the retailers to learn how to sell them. They started to get consumer reports to list energy efficiency and the ratings of appliances. And they started to work with the detergent makers, Procter & Gamble and others, to make better detergents that work in their appliances. And they got the market to start to accept it. You have to do this.